So what I have on my bench is a Tokyo Marui AK47. This is of course the the blowback thingy where this heavy weight reciprocates on the top of the gearbox. Externally, it's a great gun. A friend of mine bought this and he wanted some upgrades done. He also had a massive problem with bolt stop function. So it locks up every now and then, and this is a well-known issue for these Tokyo Marui AK47s. And that locking up has to do with the gears not finishing a cycle properly. Then one of the levers gets into a position where you just can't reset it by just pulling the charging handle once. You have to rack it, pull the trigger, and it's not fun, and then hope that it unlocks. So what I did is I've installed an Aster in this, and that's also kind of a pain in the ass to do, simply because of the track where the cables need to run. Of course, it's built for only 2 cables, and if you have like a small solder connection or some heat shrink, then it already is a bitch to get in. Of course, I could machine this out, but I don't feel like doing that, because then I have to take it to work again and put this whole assembly on the milling machine, or take everything apart and then just have this piece. And okay, I don't want to do that. So what just happened? So I completely assembled the gearbox, put the gearbox in the receiver, put the barrel in, etc., etc., which took forever because of the fucking wiring, but okay, enough about that. Then I thought like, okay, well, let's just install the Aster and then build everything and test it and see how it goes, because I probably have to open it again because the power was too low. But what I was not expecting to happen was that the Aster was not detecting the sector gear. And this is the fun thing. The Tokyo Marui sector gear, which my friend didn't want to replace directly out of the box because it was not in his budget just yet. The Aster was not detecting the cutoff lever cam like it should. So I was like, when I installed all of this and put some test shots and first pulled the trigger, of course I calibrated everything, I was like, why is it not detecting the sector gear? Like it fucking should, you know? So, and the fun thing happens here, because I of course took it apart and I already took some old LCT sector gear and a G&G sector gear, and I put a shim underneath this and then rotated it, and it was detecting just fine. Now it doesn't have anything to do with the length or the height of the cam. It has to do with shiny surfaces. So the stock Tokyo Marui sector gear is made of a type of material. I'm not really sure what, but it's maybe nickel plated brass, because it's really weak, or it's not weak, it's not hardened. So it also wears out relatively quickly. But you know, these sector gears, they are pretty much black. You know, the LCT also has like a shiny bottom surface, but this was actually working just fine. This thing with the G&G variant was also detecting just fine. The fun thing is that this whole sector gear is nickel plated. And also the bottom side, and you already figured out what I did by just showing you this. The complete inside has a recess, and that recess is of course nickel plated, and that is a really shiny surface. And what happens is that the light that is touching on the inside completely reflects around, and due to that reflection, the sector gear is not being detected. So what I first did to try and figure this out, okay, so let's take some electrical tape and just wrap that around the cutoff lever cam and then rotate it, and it was still not detecting. So then I took, you know, this stuff, and you know, I just had this laying around. It was more convenient than just, you know, completely cleaning this thing and spray painting the bottom side and have paint go everywhere, so this actually worked out pretty okay. Although the ink coming out of these pens is just, it's fucking horrible, but you gotta work with what you have. So that black ink is quite thick and it distributed quite nicely around the inner recess. You know, the coating is not really that even. Also, some of the teeth are missing a little bit of coating, but that's alright. And I put that back in and it worked flawlessly. So it was simply the light reflection on the inner recess, on the ring on the inside, that caused the detection of the sector gear not to work. And by blackening that surface, either by using a little bit of paint, you could also like take a little bit of paint and a small brush and then paint the whole inside. You could also do that. And after that, just for good measures, I also coated the cutoff lever cam also with the same black ink. Yeah, that kind of did the trick. So right now it's all going back together. I will not have this problem again, but I do still have to fix the low power because I reused an old spring and that is not really working for me. So, alright, I hope you learned something from this, because this is kind of a weird issue if you're installing an Aster, but you know, the guy that you're helping out still wants to use the old gears. Make sure that the reflections cannot go all around, causing that to fail, and also it might be wise to test this before you completely build everything together. Of course, note to self. Further, installing the Aster is a little bit difficult. The wires from the Aster to underneath the gearbox casing, that is kind of difficult to get it through. You have to be careful, because if you put too much force, then of course you can break the PCB. You don't want that. And also the screw that you need to use to lock the Aster down might be too high. So I also had to sand down this screw in order to have it not touch the sector gear. Then routing the wires, you really have to know how the wires run before you take it apart. So make sure that you take some pictures, that you know where the wires need to go, and then go to work. If you don't do this, you're going to route these wires wrong or put them down to the wrong side of the gearbox casing, and then it will not, of course, not fit together, or you will break some wires. And you will need to make your own motor connection points. And I made these from some regular ring terminals that you can just buy at any hardware store. Buy some that are not too large, cut an opening in them, squeeze them together a little bit, and then they will fit the screw that goes in here, because that is how Tokyo Marui originally designed it. So the stock wiring works like this. That is different from having them connect to this small spade. Yeah, weird design choice from Tokyo Marui to have it fit with like a fork terminal to underneath the screw. I think that's kind of, you know, out of the ordinary. Yeah, now some other things also on this particular replica are also a little bit out of the ordinary, but we'll not go into too much detail about that. But you kind of have to make those yourself. Then you have to cut the wires. First, make sure that you leave enough room. It's better to leave more wire than you actually need, and then later maybe have to do this again and cut them down a little bit to make it fit better. And of course, it's nice if you can put like a long piece of heat shrink all the way over this, where it needs to sit here in this slot. But you can't, not without machining this barrel trunnion piece, because the wires that need to sit in here only have really little space. So this is the original connection from the Aster, and usually there's an extra piece of black heat shrink that goes over the red wire, the red signal wire, and also the black wire. You need to take that out, else it will not fit. I also tried leaving a piece of heat shrink on this side, so on this side it's all alright. But if you try to leave a piece of heat shrink on this area, then you will have a really hard time getting the wires to nicely fit into this groove for the wires, because these edges are all kind of sharp. So of course I've filed all these edges down. I've broken all the edges. However, still the heat shrink catches on these edges and then just gets pulled down, and then you kind of are squeezing the wires together. Now, I've tried it several times. This is also, by the way, the first Tokyo Marui AK47 that I have worked on ever. So it's also kind of a learning curve, but at least for this specific type. But getting a piece of heat shrink to fit here just for good measure is pretty much impossible without, you know, being extremely lucky with putting everything back together. That didn't really work for me, and I have to do something about the spring, because I am sealing against the bucking, so the nozzle is sealing against the bucking just fine. However, I have just piss poor performance FPS wise, so yeah, we'll figure that out next and then rebuild everything. So maybe cutting an old spring down to size, pretty much the same size as the original, wasn't such a good idea. So we'll have to see about that. Alright, see you in the next one.